Before Ethan Caldwell built his warehouse empire, he was just another ambitious kid from a middle-class family. His parents ran a modest grocery store, and from an early age, he understood the value of hard work. Mornings before school, he unloaded deliveries, stocked shelves, and managed inventory. His father always told him that business wasn't just about numbers, it was about people. Customers weren't transactions, they were relationships. That mindset stuck with Ethan well into adulthood. At Langley Electronics, Ethan's work ethic set him apart. He started as an eager engineer, determined to prove himself, and within a few years, climbed the ranks. His boss, Travis Langley, saw his potential, even hinting at a future leadership role. But Ethan had bigger ambitions. He saw an emerging demand for specialized storage, particularly for perishable goods. The thought of building something of his own ignited a fire in him. At first, Nina, his wife, had been his strongest supporter. When he took the leap, leaving his stable job to start Caldwell warehouses, she stood by him. In those early years, money was tight, investors were skeptical, and stress was high. They worked late nights, cut costs wherever possible, and pushed through uncertainty. Whenever Ethan doubted himself, Nina reassured him. They weren't just married, they were partners, or so he believed. Success didn't come overnight, but when it did, it came fast. One contract led to another, and Caldwell warehouses expanded rapidly. Financial security followed. But somewhere in that growth, something shifted. Nina changed. The deep conversations that once filled their evenings grew rare. The warmth in their marriage faded. Ethan chalked it up to stress, assuming they were just too focused on work. What he didn't see was that while he was building a business, Nina was slipping away. Then, undeniable proof surfaced. Nina was cheating on him. Ethan sat at his warehouse desk, staring at the evidence, a thick folder of transcripts, text messages, and surveillance photos. The betrayal was irrefutable. Nina, the woman he had trusted implicitly, had been having an affair with none other than Travis Langley, her boss at Langley Electronics. Ironically, Ethan had once worked there too. That was where he met Nina, sharp, ambitious, and magnetic. She wasn't conventionally beautiful, but she had presence, confidence, and a charm that drew people in. He had pursued her relentlessly, believing he had found the perfect partner. They built a life together, delayed children for financial stability, and overcame struggles side by side. Now, the woman who once helped him cut expenses in their lean years was sneaking around behind his back. At 35, Ethan had everything for sprawling warehouses, 100 acres set aside for expansion, and a major retailer on the verge of signing a game-changing lease. His refrigerated facility, capable of storing 30 semi-trucks worth of goods, had revolutionized logistics. But despite his success, his marriage was crumbling. Nina had become distant. She avoided affection, brushed off discussions about starting a family, and dismissed Ethan's concerns with casual indifference. They had once picked out baby names together. Now, she barely looked up from her phone when he spoke. Their conversations were shallow, meals were silent, and their nights together felt forced, if they happened at all. Years ago, she had insisted on setting up her own bank account. At the time, Ethan didn't think much of it. Now, it felt like a quiet act of separation, a financial buffer between them. Something felt off. Ethan knew it. Nina was too careful, always answering her phone, never acting suspicious, never making mistakes. But his gut told him otherwise. He needed proof. He hired a private investigator, using business funds discreetly, knowing Nina rarely checked their financials. Travis Langley, married with 3 kids, was an obvious suspect. He and Nina worked closely, traveled together, and had every opportunity. Ethan contacted Security One, a private investigation firm, and met with its owner, Jason Whitman. Jason advised against using company funds for the investigation, and Ethan agreed to handle it personally. Weeks turned into months as Jason's team gathered evidence, even embedding an undercover investigator inside Langley Electronics. Then, the truth emerged. The folder on Ethan's desk told him everything. Photos, transcripts, and recordings exposed the affair in brutal detail. But what cut the deepest were Nina's words, her cruel mockery of him, her laughter at his habits, her dismissive attitude toward his dreams. She belittled him behind his back, while Travis, in turn, trashed his own wife to justify his infidelity. Anger, heartbreak, and a crushing sense of betrayal swirled inside Ethan. What now? Confront Nina? Leave? File for divorce? And what about Travis's wife, Rachel? Did she deserve to know? Exposing Travis might push him to pressure Nina into leaving Ethan for good. That night, Nina acted unusually sweet, making soup, checking on him, playing the role of the caring wife. Ethan sat at the dinner table, watching her, questioning every move. Was it guilt? Was she trying to cover her tracks? As he lay in bed, the answer became clear. His marriage was over. But he wouldn't act impulsively. He had built his business with bold, calculated decisions. This would be no different. He needed a strategy. And Nina had no idea what was coming. Ethan knew this situation demanded precision. Confronting Nina and Travis outright wasn't enough. He had to expose the truth in a way that no one could ignore. The next morning, for the first time in weeks, he felt lighter, as if a weight had lifted. He smiled at Nina as she slept beside him, and, as he got ready, said cheerfully, "Thanks for last night. I feel great, ready to move forward." She barely stirred, surprised by his sudden optimism. Over coffee, he casually mentioned, "I've decided to move forward with the new warehouse." Nina frowned. "I thought you were waiting for the retailer's decision?" "They're hesitant, but every warehouse I've built was a risk. It always paid off." She hesitated, then nodded. "Well, you've been right before." Just like that, Caldwell Warehouses was expanding again. But Ethan had a much bigger plan in motion. That day, he met with Lauren Mitchell to fast-track the project, then visited his attorney. Under his new will and corporate structure, Nina would retain her shares but have zero control over the business. Lauren would take over as CEO, only reporting profits to Nina, ensuring she couldn't drain accounts or dissolve the company. She could sell, but not destroy. Patience was key. Over the next few weeks, Ethan withdrew small amounts of cash, eventually accumulating $10,000. He visited a veterinary supply store for needles, then conducted his research offline to avoid leaving a digital footprint. At home, he played the role of a devoted husband, engaging, affectionate, attentive. To his surprise, Nina responded, even initiating intimacy for the first time in months. The irony was almost laughable. At the Langley Electronics spring party, Nina predictably disappeared with Travis. Ethan remained unbothered. The warehouse foundation was underway. It was time for the next step. Late at night in his office, he wrapped a tourniquet around his arm, swabbed his skin with alcohol, and slid the needle into his vein. Blood flowed through the clear tubing into a plastic bag. He monitored the amount carefully, enough for his plan, but not enough to weaken himself. The blood had to be human. His own. Anything else would fail lab tests. To prevent clotting, he needed an anticoagulant. Rat poison contained the necessary chemical. Carefully, he adjusted the dosage, testing in small amounts. The bag went into his locked office mini-fridge. He'd need another pint, but had to recover first. That night, Ethan set up the next phase. Using Nina's email, he took out a $1 million life insurance policy on himself. Then he called Travis. "Nina's birthday is coming up. I'm throwing her a surprise party. Can you keep her at work late?" Travis didn't hesitate. "Of course. She's a key part of the team. A lot of people would love to celebrate her." Ethan played his role flawlessly. "Great. Bring her home around 7. That way, everyone will be there to surprise her." With the party set, he finalized the details: lavish catering, an expensive gift, and an elegantly decorated cake. Everything was falling into place. A few days before the party, construction crews were preparing to pour the warehouse footings. Ethan repeated the blood-drawing process, disposing of the used supplies in a clinic dumpster. That night, while Nina slept, he retrieved the rat poison container from the garage. Wearing gloves, he pressed her hands against it, ensuring her fingerprints covered the surface, then returned it to its locked cabinet. Then came the big day. Ethan arranged for one of Nina's relatives to arrive early. To avoid suspicion, he told everyone he'd be running late. Instead of going to work, he parked around the corner and waited for Nina to leave. Once she was gone, he got to work. Wearing rain gear, he lay on the bed and poured nearly 2 pints of blood onto himself and the mattress, letting it soak deep into the fabric. He stood, allowing the remaining blood to drip onto the floor as he walked. In the bathroom, he rinsed off, leaving faint traces behind. In the kitchen, he selected a knife from Nina's favorite set, dipped it in his blood, wiped it clean, and returned it to the block. Microscopic traces would remain. Next, he poured a glass of booze, laced it with rat poison, then dumped it down the drain, rinsing the glass before placing it in the dishwasher. For the final touch, he unrolled a plastic sheet, placed heavy objects on one end, and smeared blood across it before rolling it up tightly. Dragging it through the house, he left streaks leading from the bedroom to the garage, right to the spot where Travis always parked. Before leaving, he typed a short note and left it on the kitchen table. "Nina, I was called away on emergency business. Enjoy your birthday. We'll celebrate when I return. No signature. In his desk, he placed an envelope containing proof of Nina and Travis's affair, knowing the police would find it. Nearby, a few drops of blood had splattered onto the wood. He left them untouched. After stripping off the rain gear, he stuffed it into a trash bag and tossed it into a liquor store dumpster, burying it under garbage. Then he waited. Soon, Nina's cousin arrived with the caterer, followed by more guests. Excitement filled the air. Everyone was waiting for the guest of honor. And Ethan? He was waiting for the chaos to begin. Ethan had anticipated someone noticing the blood quickly, but it took longer than expected. Then, hushed voices rippled through the house. Someone had spotted the droplets. Moments later, panic set in. A police cruiser sped up the street, sirens blaring. Guests arriving at the party were stopped at the entrance. Officers swarmed the house. Right at 7 p.m., Travis and Nina pulled up in his truck, completely unaware of the chaos awaiting them. They were forced to park further away, walking up to a scene of flashing lights, confused expressions, and rising tension. From the shadows, Ethan watched. The moment they exited the truck, he moved swiftly, dropping a few small blood droplets into the truck bed, then placing a roll of duct tape with a faint smear and a blood-stained plastic sheet inside. Just another breadcrumb for investigators. The trap was nearly complete. A few blocks away, he hailed a cab, directing the driver to drop him near his warehouse construction site. From there, he walked 2 miles, ensuring no digital or traceable trail led back to him. At the construction site, he let a few drops of blood seep into the drying cement before checking into a roadside motel, paying in cash. He planned to stay low for about a week, just long enough for the investigation and rumors to strangle Nina and Travis. By the time he resurfaced, their lives would be in ruins. That night, Ethan slept better than he had in months. By morning, curiosity got the better of him. He bought a cheap tablet with cash, using public Wi-Fi to check social media. He already knew where to look. Nina's cousin, always the gossip, had been live posting everything. Her latest update confirmed what Ethan had been waiting for. A caterer had slipped on blood. At first, everyone thought someone was injured, but when they followed the trail, it led straight to the bedroom. The scene was a bloodbath. Panic spread. The police were called immediately. Then came the inevitable question. Where was Nina? Right at 7 o'clock, she and Travis arrived, completely oblivious. The second she asked what was happening, officers grabbed them both and hauled them to the station. That's when it hit everyone. Ethan was missing. He leaned back, satisfied. It was all falling into place. To keep himself untraceable, he had removed his phone battery before vanishing. Instead, he relied on local radio for updates. By the next afternoon, news outlets reported his disappearance. Nina and Travis were now official persons of interest. He smirked. The bait had been taken, though one unexpected detail made him pause. His face was everywhere. Laying low was more crucial than ever. To alter his appearance, he decided to grow a beard, something he had never done before. Still, he needed food. Wearing an old hoodie, he kept his head down and paid in cash at a fast food joint. That evening, he took a bus to a quiet lakeside town, renting a cabin and picking up secondhand clothes. He blended in easily, spending his days fishing and making small talk with locals. At night, he monitored the news. The media frenzy around Nina and Travis's affair intensified. The public devoured every scandalous twist. Checking social media again, he found another post from Nina's cousin. This one gave him pause. Nina's parents were getting death threats. The town had turned on them, blaming them for how she turned out. Ethan hadn't anticipated that. He had always liked her parents. They had welcomed him like family, and now they were collateral damage. For a fleeting moment, regret flickered through him. Then, a darker thought crept in. Maybe Nina and Travis deserved to suffer slowly, the way his parents had. Not an end, just suffering. A week and a half into his disappearance, things escalated. Ethan was flipping through TV channels in his cabin when he stumbled upon a live press conference. The district attorney stood behind a podium, addressing the case. Though Ethan had missed the beginning, one sentence stood out. Nina and Travis had been indicted for homicide. His heart pounded as he pulled up the digital edition of his hometown newspaper. The front-page headline confirmed it. He smiled. Everything had clicked into place. The district attorney was up for re-election, and this case was a political gift. Normally, indictments didn't happen this fast, but securing one before the election was a power move. The DA's statement methodically laid out the case. The bedroom was drenched in blood, leading directly to the garage where the trail ended. Forensics confirmed it was Ethan Caldwell's blood. Traces of warfarin, the active ingredient in rat poison, were found in his blood samples. A rat poison container, covered in Nina's fingerprints, had been recovered. A glass in the dishwasher contained traces of poison with Ethan's fingerprints. A kitchen knife bore his blood. A note from Ethan stated he had left on business, but his car remained in the garage and no belongings were missing. His business partner confirmed no planned trips. Nina had recently taken out a $1 million life insurance policy on him. Blood matching Ethan's DNA was found in Travis's truck, along with blood-stained duct tape and plastic sheeting. The kicker? Both suspects frequently traveled and had passports, making them immediate flight risks. Ethan exhaled slowly. It had worked. Even a local columnist had published a scathing editorial condemning cheaters and their selfish betrayals. He had won. But then, reality set in. What happened when he reappeared? Could he be charged with fraud? Obstruction? Worse? He had to act before the DA realized they had been played. Ethan stepped off the bus in the nearest city, pulling his hoodie low over his face before heading into a convenience store. He grabbed a prepaid phone, casually spinning a story about losing his wallet and needing to contact his family. The clerk barely looked up before ringing him up. Once outside, he powered the device on, dialing the police tip line. After a long pause, a voice finally answered. "This is Detective Adam Foster. This call is being recorded and traced per department policy. How can I help you?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Detective, this is Ethan Caldwell. I hear you've been looking for me. I want to clarify that I'm alive, unharmed, and that what happened at my house was carefully planned to expose my wife's infidelity. I expected attention, but I didn't expect charges before I returned." Silence stretched before Foster spoke again, skepticism clear in his voice. "You're claiming to be Ethan Caldwell? We've had a lot of those." Ethan smirked. "I figured. Ask me anything. Let's cut through the doubt." Foster launched into a rapid series of personal and case-related questions. Ethan answered them flawlessly. Another pause, then a shift in the detective's tone. "Mr. Caldwell, we need you to come in immediately." "Are you in danger?" "No. I left to keep my distance until things settled." "No one knows where I am," Ethan said, stepping onto a bus as a patrol car cruised past, scanning pedestrians. He leaned back in his seat, watching as it turned down a side street. "I assume you've already got people searching. I won't fight it if they find me, but I'm not handing myself over yet." The DA followed the evidence, can't blame him for that. He glanced out the window, keeping his voice measured. "I'll be in touch." Before Foster could respond, Ethan pulled the battery from the phone and pocketed it. Let them trace a dead end. At a roadside motel hours later, he reinserted the battery and made his next call to his attorney. The man's reaction was immediate. "Are you out of your mind? You could be facing criminal charges, fraud, obstruction, conspiracy. You staged a disappearance and let the world believe you were dead. Do you know what you've done?" Ethan let the outburst run its course before responding. "What I need you to do is get ahead of this. Foster knows I'm alive. It's only a matter of time before it reaches the DA. I need someone negotiating before this turns into a legal nightmare." A deep sigh crackled over the line. "Fine. What else?" "Divorce attorney," Ethan said flatly. "By now, Nina's name is poison. That was the point. I wanted her to be branded for what she did. When the dust settles, file the papers." The lawyer hesitated. "You really orchestrated this down to the last detail." Ethan's tone was ice. "Travis needs to suffer, too. Serve him with alienation of affection papers. If Langley Electronics has a no fraternization policy, he should pay for ruining my marriage." More scribbling on the other end. "And the media? I need someone controlling the narrative when I return. No interviews, no statements. Just silence." His attorney agreed to set up secure lines of communication, ensuring the DA couldn't pull phone records. With that settled, Ethan moved to his next call, Lauren Mitchell, his COO. She answered, but immediately hung up. He chuckled. Predictable. Dialing the main office, he instructed the receptionist, "If she hangs up again, reconnect me." Moments later, Lauren answered, her tone sharp. "Who is this?" "Don't play games. I know my stunt worked too well, but it's me," Ethan said, voice steady. "How do I know it's really you?" she challenged. He sighed. "Ask whatever you need to." After grilling him with company-specific security questions, she finally exhaled. "All right. What's the plan? When are you coming back?" Not yet, Ethan admitted. My lawyer is handling the DA. And no, I have no plans to talk to Nina. Lauren hesitated. She's spiraling, Ethan. Her family turned their backs on her. Not just for the affair, for the murder accusation. She has no one left. She even called me, convinced Travis had you killed, and framed her. Ethan's jaw tightened. I didn't expect her to take it well, but I only wanted her to feel what I did. Betrayed, humiliated. We built everything together, made sacrifices, agreed on the future. Then she changed the rules. No discussion. Just took my dream of a family and threw it away. His voice hardened. Then I saw what she said about me. All those years, and she never respected me. She laughed at me. I wasted my time on someone who never cared. She needed to pay for that. Lauren was quiet. He continued, his tone cold. Divorce would have given her the chance to rewrite history, spin her own version of events. This way, even if I lose everything, she's permanently stained. No matter where she goes, she'll be the woman who might have killed her husband. Lauren didn't argue. Instead, she updated him. The warehouse project was still on track, but police had brought in ground-penetrating radar, searching for his body. Ethan smirked. They were still chasing ghosts. Business was stable, and Nina had only touched one account, to hire a lawyer. No unexpected withdrawals. He nodded to himself. Fine, he finally said. Give me her number. Lauren hesitated before passing it along. Nina's personal numbers were flooded with messages, some hateful, some supportive, most from reporters. She had gone into hiding, promising the DA she wouldn't leave town. Ethan stared at the number, considering. He had gotten exactly what he wanted. But now, the real game was about to begin. Travis had gone into hiding, not because of the police, but due to the relentless threats pouring in. His business was collapsing, clients pulling out, and employees quitting. Rachel had wasted no time in filing for divorce, making it very clear that she wanted nothing to do with a cheating husband accused of homicide. She even got a restraining order. That bit of news made Ethan smile. After his long conversation with Lauren, his prepaid phone was nearly dead. He plugged it into charge and left the cabin, walking to a marina restaurant for lunch. The fresh air and calm waters helped him think. When he returned, his phone was fully charged. He hesitated before dialing Nina's number. She might not answer an unfamiliar call. Instead, he reinserted the battery into his personal phone. Let her see his name. She answered on the third ring, her voice cautious. For a moment, Ethan considered whispering like a ghost from the grave, just to rattle her. But he held back. Nina, it's Ethan. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. Are you there? It's me. I'm alive. Then suddenly, she broke down, gasping, sobbing, unraveling completely. He stayed quiet, letting her process it, letting her drown in the weight of it all. When she finally spoke, her voice was raw, shaking. Ethan, is it really you? You sound like him, but so did the others. How do I know? Ethan sighed. The first time we got caught in the rain, remember? We were in the middle of something when it started pouring. You made me swear never to tell anyone. A sharp inhale. Then a whisper. Oh, Ethan, it is you. You said others sounded like me. What happened? She let out a broken laugh, half mad, half desperate. I kept getting calls. Some from your number. Even the house phone. Ghostly voices accusing me of murder. The police dismissed them as hackers, but I was losing my mind. I almost didn't answer this time, but Lauren told me you were alive. Ethan waited. I started believing you were really dead, Nina admitted. That your body was hidden. That I'd never find you. I even accused Travis. But I knew one thing, I was innocent. Before he could respond, she continued, her voice rising. I don't know whether to be relieved or furious. You did this to me. To us. I want to hug you and slap you at the same time. If I yell, it's because I was terrified. Her voice cracked. I need to know why. Why, Ethan? Did I really treat you that badly? Ethan's voice was devoid of emotion. You cheated with your boss. You refused to have kids. Our marriage was dead, Nina. You used our home like a hotel while your career and your affair took priority. I bet you even went back that night and let him have you again. She started to protest, but Ethan hung up. Without hesitation, he powered the phone down, pulled the battery, and stuffed it into his duffel bag. He collapsed onto the bed, exhausted, and fell asleep. When he woke, night had fallen. He wandered back to the marina, had a light meal, and mulled over his next steps. He was getting bored. Fishing had been a good distraction, but he couldn't stay hidden forever. It was time for something new. Back at the cabin, he flipped through news channels. Not a single mention of his case. The DA was scrambling, trying to spin how they had been completely outmaneuvered. He smirked as an old rerun of The Fugitive played, a man falsely accused, dodging the authorities. Should he do the same? He still had most of his cash, but unlike fugitives of the past, he had online banking, credit cards, and full access to his wealth. He could manage everything remotely, fly in for business meetings, then disappear before anyone realized he was there. By morning, he made his decision. That afternoon, Ethan packed up and left. At the pier, a young boy stood watching the fishermen, his eyes filled with longing. "You like fishing?" Ethan asked. The boy nodded. "Yeah, but I don't have any gear." Ethan handed him his rod, reel, and tackle box. "It's yours." The kid's eyes widened. "For real?" "Yeah, kid. Enjoy it." Before the boy could stammer out a thank you, Ethan walked away. At the bus station, he bought a ticket to the nearest city with an international airport. From there, he could go anywhere. Over the next year, he traveled. He stayed in different cities, never more than a week or two, before moving on. Hotels got tiresome, so he eventually bought a Class A RV, converting it into his mobile base. He'd drive to a new city, park at an RV site, rent a car, and explore. He visited museums, historical landmarks, and national parks. He attended sporting events, professional, college, even high school games. Some nights, he went to bars, blending into the crowds. But he was careful, always careful. Occasionally, he met a woman, but he had rules. No married women. He refused to do to another man what Travis had done to him. The encounters were brief, just a few nights, then he moved on. Meanwhile, Nina fought the divorce. She demanded counseling. The judge ruled against her. Then she demanded a share of the business. Ethan's lawyer crushed that attempt. She could receive profits, but she couldn't dismantle what he built. She got the house, the cars, and everything inside. It was a hefty settlement. Travis, however, disappeared. The SEC was after him for financial crimes. Langley Electronics teetered on the edge of bankruptcy, and with Travis gone, Nina took control, barely keeping it afloat. She had been disgraced, but she was still fighting. Then came the inevitable request. Nina wanted a meeting. Ethan agreed. He returned the same way he had left, by bus. To stay discreet, he parked his RV 100 miles away, took a taxi to the depot, then rode into the city. Another taxi dropped him off at the upscale hotel where the meeting was arranged. Before stepping inside, he scanned the area. He doubted the police cared anymore, but he wasn't taking chances. The new DA had bigger cases to handle, a high-profile nightclub shooting, gang activity, a missing politician. Ethan's little stunt was old news. Inside, he met his attorney in the lobby before walking into the private meeting room. Nina was waiting. Nina was already seated with her lawyer when Ethan walked into the meeting room. She looked composed, but stress had taken its toll, fine lines around her eyes, a weariness in her posture. She studied him, taking in his leaner frame, the neatly trimmed goatee, and the casual yet sharp outfit that had replaced his old corporate suits. He met her gaze without hesitation and leaned forward. "You called this meeting. Start talking." She glanced at her lawyer, inhaled deeply, then spoke. "Ethan, first and foremost, I want to apologize." He didn't respond, just watched her with the same measured expression he had perfected over the past year. "Travis and I didn't happen because of anything you did wrong," she admitted. "We worked late, had dinners, and things escalated. It wasn't planned. It just happened." Ethan remained silent, taking a notepad from his pocket and jotting something down as she continued. "It wasn't about him being better than you. It was just different. I still love you," she insisted. "I want to stay married. I asked for counseling because I believe we can rebuild this. I know now how much I hurt you. Please come home. Your things are still there. We can start fresh." Ethan turned the notepad toward her. It was a checklist of common excuses from cheaters. Nearly every box was ticked. "You hit most of the classics," he said flatly. "The only ones missing are it's not you, it's me, and you never lacked love." Her confidence wavered. She wasn't used to losing. She had clawed her way back from disgrace, taking over Travis's role at Langley Electronics, sealing major deals, including one with Lauren Mitchell for additional warehouse space. But now, she was grasping at straws. Finally, she admitted, "I thought we were getting too old for kids, and my job is demanding sometimes 60, 80 hours a week. I've been fighting to keep the company afloat. I don't have time for it." She stopped, realizing her mistake too late. Ethan's expression didn't change, but his voice was ice. "And there it is. I made adjustments to balance work and life. You think Langley Electronics can't survive without you working nonstop? He shook his head. I don't know why you want me back. I'd see even less of you than when you were with Travis. And I bet our sex life would be even worse. He stood. Maybe you should find another office fling. That seems to be what you need. Without waiting for a response, he walked out, heading straight for the bus depot. Nina didn't stop him. That, more than anything, told him she knew she had lost. He wasn't just walking away from her. He was walking toward his future. At the depot, he called his attorney. Proceed with the divorce. For the first time in years, he felt at peace. He stepped up to the ticket counter, ready to leave everything behind. A patrol car pulled up beside him. Excuse me, sir, a uniformed officer called out. Are you Ethan Caldwell? Ethan turned to face him. Yes. Is there a problem? The officer's expression remained neutral, but his voice was firm. You're under arrest for false reporting and conspiring to bring false charges against Nina Caldwell and Travis Langley. Hands on your head. Surprised but composed, Ethan complied. The cuffs clicked into place. He was booked at the station, placed in a holding cell, and informed that he would likely make bail soon. When his lawyer arrived, he reassured him that negotiations were already in motion. The DA wanted this wrapped up quickly. At the bail hearing, the court debated whether Ethan was a flight risk. I'm essentially homeless, Your Honor, Ethan said, his tone calm. My RV is my residence. I'll park it locally to comply with bond terms. Nina's attorney stood, addressing the judge. Your Honor, my client is willing to cover Mr. Caldwell's bail on the condition that he be placed under house arrest at their shared residence. Ethan stiffened. His jaw clenched as he turned to his lawyer, shaking his head. This wasn't goodwill. It was a trap. His attorney rose. Your Honor, my client refuses to be confined with his estranged wife. Given the circumstances, he believes this is an attempt at retribution for her public humiliation. He is, however, willing to surrender his passport and comply with electronic monitoring, but not at his former home. The judge studied them both before raising an eyebrow. So your client would rather stay in jail? Ethan's lawyer didn't hesitate. Yes, Your Honor. He requests a speedy trial. The judge sighed. Recess. Counsel, join me in chambers. 15 minutes later, they returned. Nina's attorney looked irritated. Ethan's lawyer pulled him aside, speaking in a low voice. The judge is sympathetic. He even laughed about how you exposed Nina and Travis. The DA doesn't want a trial. It would be a media circus. They want this resolved quietly. Ethan's expression remained neutral. What's the offer? Plead guilty. Pay a fine. Serve 1 year of probation. It was a fair deal. A trial could mean actual jail time. Fine, Ethan said. Back in the courtroom, the judge addressed him. Mr. Caldwell, how do you plead to the charge of making a false police report? Guilty, Your Honor. The judge nodded. You're fined $1,000 and sentenced to 1 year of probation. Just like that, he was free. After leaving jail, he pulled out his phone and called Lauren. Lauren, I'll be here for 1 year on probation. Can you arrange for my RV to be brought into town? Any corporate housing available? Actually, yes, she said. I bought a small apartment complex last year. We keep 2 units for clients. They're fully furnished. Pick one, and I'll handle the rest. Within hours, he was settled into a sleek, modern apartment. That night, he cracked open a beer, watched TV, and let himself relax. The next morning, he walked into his office for the first time in what felt like forever. The office had changed. Lauren had modernized operations, expanded the business, and restructured logistics. The longtime employees welcomed Ethan back warmly, while the newer ones eyed him with curiosity, unsure of how to react to the man behind the infamous scandal. Lauren smirked. So, what now? Are you taking back control? And if so, where does that leave me? Ethan grinned. You've done an incredible job. Expansion is happening, and the company's thriving. I want you here long term. How do you feel about owning a percentage of the business? Lauren's eyebrows lifted. She had expected to keep her position, but equity? That was unexpected. She hesitated, then smiled. Ethan, I want to stay on as CEO, but I also need time off soon. Ethan tilted his head. Time off. Lauren exhaled. My husband and I have been waiting for the right time to start a family. I'm 6 weeks pregnant. Ethan blinked, then broke into a grin. That's amazing. Congratulations. Take all the time you need. Lauren beamed. By the way, would you consider being the baby's godfather? For a moment, Ethan was speechless. Then he laughed, pulling her into a quick hug. Absolutely. Over the next few weeks, Ethan immersed himself in business operations. Lauren's expansion plans were solid, and he approved them all. Since Nina was still a co-owner, she had to be informed of major decisions, but surprisingly, she raised no objections. Instead, she focused on trying to mend their marriage, using every possible tactic, pleading, manipulation, even legal action. When none of that worked, she petitioned the court for mandatory counseling. Ethan had no choice but to comply. Refusing could mean contempt charges, jeopardizing his probation. Expecting bias, he was surprised when Dr. Vanessa Harding, the court-appointed therapist, remained neutral. She didn't focus on the scandal but instead explored his background, childhood, and marriage. Eventually, she asked the inevitable question, "Why didn't you let Nina and Travis be prosecuted?" Ethan's answer was simple. "I hated what she did, but I couldn't let her go down for something she didn't do. I regret how my plan affected her relationships. That wasn't my goal. I just wanted her to feel the betrayal I did." After the session, emotionally drained, he went home, poured himself a drink, and let his mind go blank. Between counseling, he focused on work. Since probation kept him from traveling, he delegated property scouting to his team, a valuable learning experience for them. The first couple's session was tense. Nina tried sitting beside him, but he deliberately chose a spot across from her, where he could read both her and Dr. Harding's reactions. The counselors started with their past, how they met, their early days, the wedding. It was surprisingly neutral, but when it came time for homework, they were tasked with listing when their marriage had started unraveling. After the session, Nina chased after him, begging him to come home. He ignored her, disappearing into traffic before she could follow. At the next session, Ethan laid everything out, her long hours, the emotional distance, the lack of intimacy. He explained how, after months of feeling like a stranger in his own marriage, he had hired a private investigator. Nina had a different take. "I never stopped loving you," she insisted. The affair wasn't a betrayal, it was just separate. Ethan had expected that excuse. Without a word, he pulled out a portable DVD player and pressed play. The recording started mid-conversation. Baby, that was amazing. You do me better than Ethan ever could." Travis chuckled. "I don't know why you even married him." Nina's voice followed. "I almost left him when he quit working for you and started that stupid warehouse business. My job kept us afloat. I should just divorce him already and be yours completely." Travis's tone darkened. "Have you cut him off like I asked?" "Of course," Nina purred. "I don't want anything from my weak little husband. I keep myself pure for you." Ethan paused the video. Nina sat frozen, her hands trembling, her face pale. Ethan turned to her, his voice cold. "You say the words, but I know better. And now you expect me to come back." Dr. Harding sighed. "Unless Nina is willing to make serious changes, I don't see how this can continue. I do believe individual therapy could be beneficial, though." Ethan stood. "I see no point in continuing. Nina lives in a fantasy where she's never at fault and expects me to beg for scraps of affection. She doesn't want a husband, she wants a doormat." Without another word, he walked out. Nina ran after him. "Ethan, please, just talk to me." Despite everything, he agreed. One last conversation. They sat in a training room at the warehouse. Ethan folded his arms, his expression unreadable. "This is it. Say what you need to say, then leave." Nina studied him, searching for the man who had once loved her. But he was gone. "I'm so sorry you heard that recording," she whispered. "I never meant for you to." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he let her continue. "I never really felt that way about you," she insisted. "Travis needed his ego stroked. He told me to cut you off, act indifferent, and push you away. I thought it was just a game." Her voice wavered. "We even laughed about it. About how frustrated you must have been. We thought it was funny." Ethan's face remained impassive, but something inside him cracked. She had no idea how deep she was cutting him, how much those words confirmed every doubt, every moment of agony he had endured. Nina swallowed hard. "That night, the night of the surprise party. Travis told me what you had planned. We laughed about it. Then we had sex in his office. Twice." Ethan's expression darkened, but he stayed silent. She hesitated, then forced herself to continue. At the time, it felt harmless, even fun. But looking back, it was cruel. "I demeaned the one person I had promised to love forever." Ethan stared at her. Not with anger. Not with pain. Just indifference. "You didn't just betray me, Nina," he said finally. "You turned me into a joke." She flinched. "But you know the real punchline?" He stood, looking down at her. "I'm the only one still laughing." Without another word, he walked out. And this time, Nina didn't follow. Ethan sat quietly, arms crossed, listening as Nina unraveled in front of him. Her voice, raw and cracked, carried the weight of a year of torment. When we pulled up to the house, we were laughing, she admitted, her tone bitter. I felt smug. Great sex on the side while you threw me a party. I even wondered what expensive gift you had picked out. A choked, humorless laugh escaped her. I was so full of myself, I didn't notice anything was off. I didn't question why people were standing outside instead of hiding, why there wasn't any excitement for my surprise. She exhaled shakily, her hands gripping the table. And then, we heard about the blood. Speculation started immediately, but one thing was certain, you were missing, and there was a lot of blood. Her eyes turned distant, as if reliving the moment. At first, I denied everything. Some guests still wished me a happy birthday, but then the rumors spread. People backed away. Then someone asked what we had done with your body. Her hands covered her face, shoulders trembling. That's when the fear set in. The police arrived. Some guests left, but most stayed, watching. An officer pulled me aside and started questioning me, where I'd been that evening. She laughed hollowly, wiping at her face. Of course, I couldn't say I was screwing my boss in his office. But that's exactly where I was while my husband was supposedly being attacked. She met his gaze, her eyes hollow. And I think that's exactly what you wanted, for me to feel that fear, that helplessness. And I did. Her voice grew quieter, but the pain in it was razor sharp. They took us in for questioning. That's when I found out you knew all along. They showed me everything. Every message, every recording, every cruel thing I ever said about you. And they made me watch it all. She broke down, her body shaking as she tried to regain control. When she finally spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. I was shattered. I thought you were dead, and they were accusing me of killing you. She took a slow, unsteady breath. Then they started asking about Travis's finances, about whether he needed money. Then they showed me an insurance policy I supposedly took out on you. A brand new one. She swallowed hard. I couldn't even think straight. Finally, I asked for a lawyer just to make it stop. Ethan stood, poured her a glass of water, and set it in front of her. She took it with a quiet, "Thank you," before continuing. With all the accusations flying around, I even started wondering if Travis had something to do with it. The police found plastic and duct tape with your blood in his truck. They kept pressing me about his business, about our affair. And I started thinking, had he actually hired someone to get rid of you? That insurance money would have helped him a lot. She let out a slow breath, her eyes filled with disbelief. For the next week, I lived in hell. My husband, the man I still loved, was presumed dead. My own family believed the rumors. My parents refused to speak to me. My siblings cut me off. I couldn't stay in the house, but I had nowhere else to go. And when I did step inside, all I saw was the blood. Your blood. The lab confirmed it. She looked up at him, voice trembling. Ethan, where did you even get that much blood? He didn't answer. Nina swallowed hard. Then the police came again. This time, they had questions about rat poison, something I didn't even know we had. But my fingerprints were the only ones on the package. She shook her head. I started losing my mind. I knew I hadn't hurt you, but I couldn't be sure Travis hadn't. He was unraveling, losing weight, barely eating, barely sleeping. We weren't even speaking anymore. We only talked at work when absolutely necessary. Her voice grew unsteady. Then Rachel threw him out. Filed for divorce. His business collapsed. First, local clients pulled their contracts. Then it spread across the country. She inhaled sharply. And then, the district attorney went on the news. He said he was taking the case to the grand jury. No one had even declared you legally dead yet, and I was already facing a homicide charge. A broken sob escaped her. She covered her face, her body shaking. The room fell into a heavy silence. When she finally looked up at him, her face was wet with tears. Did you hate me that much? She asked. Did you really want to destroy me? For the first time, Ethan felt something close to regret. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. You won. Everyone abandoned me. No one at work, no one in my family, and certainly no one in your family would speak to me. I was completely alone. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Every time I went home to grab clothes, I found graffiti on the door. Butcher. Liar. Witch. She inhaled sharply. Then the call started. I changed my number over and over, but they always found me. I think someone at the phone store was leaking my information. She shuddered, staring at the floor. The worst ones came from your number. Her voice dropped even lower, barely audible. A whisper on the other end. How could you kill me? Nina, how could you do that to me? Ethan didn't react. I was unraveling, she admitted. I called Lauren a few times, hoping she'd talk to me, but I knew she hated me. She was your friend, not mine. She exhaled, steadying herself. Then you came out of hiding. And you called me. She shook her head, eyes burning. I was so relieved. I just wanted to see you, to hold you, to scream at you, to apologize, to do anything to make things right. Her expression darkened. But no. You just let me know you were alive, and then disappeared again. She let out a bitter laugh. Lauren wouldn't tell me where you were. The rumors started again. Some people actually thought you had died for real, that I was lying to shift suspicion. Her voice trembled with exhaustion. I knew you were sneaking into town for business, but you never once reached out. Never once tried to see me. She studied him now, looking for anything in his face. But Ethan gave her nothing. Nina exhaled, her shoulders sagging. At least you left me enough money to keep the house. Then Travis vanished, and Langley Electronics nearly collapsed. I had to take over and fight to keep it alive. She met his gaze. And now, after everything, you come back and expect me to have kids? Ethan, I'm barely holding everything together. How can I raise a child when I'm working 16, 18-hour days? What kind of life would that be for a baby? She leaned forward, desperation creeping into her voice. 100 employees depend on me. Their families depend on me. They need me. Ethan studied her. Beneath the exhaustion and passion, she was grasping at something she had already lost. I just want my husband back, she whispered. I want my marriage back. Can't you forgive me? Can't we love each other again? She reached across the table, her hands trembling slightly, hoping he'd take them. Ethan didn't move. He didn't pull away, but he didn't reach for her either. Is it my turn now? His voice was calm, measured. Nina swallowed hard and nodded. Ethan's face was unreadable. When he spoke, every word landed with purpose. You say you want our marriage back. Which version? He leaned forward. The one where we had a future, plan for kids, build a life together? Or the one where you came home just to sleep after spending your days in your boss's bed? She opened her mouth, but he held up a hand. No. I listened to you. Now you listen. She sat back, her expression uncertain. You say you want to be my wife, yet you insist you need to work endless hours to keep Langley afloat. So tell me, Nina, where do I fit into that? When exactly do you plan to be my wife? His voice was quiet, but every word hit like a hammer. You sleep, right? He tilted his head. Then what's left for me? Am I supposed to just sit around, waiting for you to notice me? Grateful for whatever little attention you throw my way. He shook his head. I refuse to be a placeholder in my own marriage. If Langley needs you that much, maybe it deserves to fail. Her face burned with shame, but Ethan didn't stop. Travis never worked that much, and it was his company. Yet somehow, he had plenty of time to make his wife feel loved, while also screwing you every day. She flinched. You have vice presidents, don't you? What the hell do they do all day? Maybe you need to cut some dead weight. He stood, pushing back his chair. I want something real. A life outside of work. A wife, not a roommate. And I will not be second place in my own marriage. Walking to the door, he pulled it open, but before stepping out, he turned back. I assume you still feel passion sometimes. You certainly did with Travis, just not with me. His voice was even, but there was no warmth left. Maybe you should just hire someone. Schedule your encounters like business meetings. It would be more efficient. He gave her one last look. And if you're just looking for warmth at night, get a dog. A dog will love you unconditionally. A dog will be loyal. A dog will forgive you. His expression hardened. I won't. Then he walked out. Nina sat frozen, hollow inside. All she had left was Langley Electronics. But was it worth it? The sacrifices, the long hours, the nights alone, did any of it matter? Or was she just another executive, easily replaced? She suddenly felt much older than 38. That night, she visited the local animal shelter. Maybe a dog would make the house feel less empty. Maybe it would give her a reason to come home. In the days that followed, Nina stopped trying to win Ethan back. Their lawyers finalized a settlement, and she agreed to sell her share of Caldwell warehouses for a set price. That allowed Ethan to do something he had wanted for a long time, grant Lauren Mitchell 10% ownership in the business. Ethan resumed day-to-day operations while Lauren went on maternity leave. She stayed home for 12 weeks after giving birth to her son, Lucas Ethan Mitchell, named after both her husband and Ethan. The baby was adored by everyone, and Ethan took his role as godfather seriously, even though Nina was named godmother. She embraced the role fully, doting on Lucas and later volunteering as honorary aunt to any of Lauren's future children. Over time, she learned to delegate responsibilities and build a leadership team she could trust. This gave her something she hadn't had in years, a life outside of work. She didn't date much, but occasionally she had casual companions. No long-term commitments, just company when she wanted it. Once Lauren returned to work and Ethan finished his probation, he hit the road again. His RV became his home as he traveled the country, part businessman, part tourist. He scouted new locations for warehouse expansions, built relationships, and enjoyed the freedom he had fought so hard for. Occasionally, he shared his bed with a woman for a night or two, but he was in no hurry to settle down. First, he had to learn how to be alone without feeling lonely. That realization took the pressure off any future relationships. For the first time, Ethan wasn't looking for something to fill the void, because there was no void left to fill. Years passed. His business grew, expanding into new markets. He occasionally returned home for in-person meetings, ensuring everything stayed on track. These visits were productive, reinforcing his leadership without tying him down. He also made time for his godchildren. Lauren, not wanting Lucas to grow up an only child, had more kids over the years. Each pregnancy brought Ethan back home temporarily, stepping in to oversee operations while she was away. Between work, he took the kids camping, to amusement parks, to ball games. He played catch, attended their soccer matches, though he never quite understood the hype, and joined countless family cookouts. Whenever Nina attended these gatherings, he remained polite. Over time, their interactions became less strained. Did Ethan ever remarry? Did he ever have kids of his own? Maybe. Maybe not. This isn't the full story of his life. But one thing he never regretted was exposing Nina and Travis. It had been a masterstroke, unraveling whatever future they had imagined together. In the end, it had been a brilliant trick. A bloody good trick.